Hi, welcome everyone to our YouTube channel. So, today we're gonna discuss what is contract and how the creation of it. Contract is an agreement which give rise to obligations that are enforced or recognized by law. So, this is the definition of contract. But how contracts made? What's the creation of a contract? So a contract is made when one party accepts an offer made by the other party. That's mean that contract must have an offer and must have an acceptance. So, what is offer? So, an offer is an expression of willingness to contract on specific term made with the intention that is to become binding as soon as it is accepted by the person to whom is addressed. So, this is the definition of an offer. An offer. So, an offer must be made with the intention to be bound by it. This is the case when we can take it as an offer. So, if a statement, for example, was made simply as a response to a request for information, this can be only an invitation to treat, not an offer. And this is the fundamental point of the difference between offer and invitation to treat. An offer also might be held to have been made if the offerer's words and conduct would induce a reasonable person to believe that the offerer had the requisite intention. That is, the intention to make an offer. The words used by one party, whatever his or her real intention may be, are to be construed in the sense in which they would be reasonable, understood by the other. Now, let's discuss the termination of an offer. So, as a general rule, an offer can be withdrawn at any time before it's accepted. Notice of the withdrawal must be given to the offeree. An offer can be terminated by rejection of the offer. An attempt to accept an offer on a new term not contained in the offer may be considered a rejection of the offer, accompanied by a counter offer. An offeree who makes such a counter offer cannot later accept the original offer, since a counter offer kills the original offer. An offer which is expressly stated to last for a fixed time cannot be accepted after that time. An offer which has no express provision limiting its duration, termination after the lapse of reasonable time, if an offer expressly provides that it is to terminate on the occurrence of a condition, the offer cannot be accepted after that condition has occurred. So this is the cases where the termination of an offer. So we have four cases that I just mentioned. So what about acceptance? What's acceptance? So an acceptance is a final and unqualified expression of assent to the term of an offer, a mere acknowledgement that one has received an offer or an alternative proposal by the offeree, so would not amount to an acceptance. An offer may be accepted by conduct, for example, by supplying or dispatching goods in response to an offer to buy them. Although there is a requirement that the acceptance must be unqualified, this does not mean that there must be precise verbal correspondence between the offer and acceptance. For instance, an acceptance can be effective even though it departs from the wording of the offer if it expresses an alternative term which the law would imply anyway. So, communication of acceptance. Generally, an acceptance has no effect until it's communicated to the offerer. So for an acceptance to be communicated, it must normally be brought to the offerers.
So, case number
Notice,
1, if an agent
in
of the
exceptional
offerer has the
cases,
authority
an
to receive
acceptance may be
acceptance,
effective, although it is not
acceptance
communicated to the offerer,
takes effect as
like
soon
in
as the
this following
acceptance is communicated
situations.
to the agent. So, this is the first case. The second case is if the communication to the offerer is thwarted by the offerer's own conduct, he or she would be precluded from denying the acceptance was received since it was due to his or her own fault that it was not received. So this is the two cases. Now, have you ever guys heard acceptance in a literal contract? So acceptance in a literal contract is, well, let me explain it. An offer under a literal contract is made when one party promises to pay the other party a sum of money or do some other act or to forbear from doing something. If the other party does or forbears to do something without making any promise to that effect, a number of rules apply to the acceptances of an offer of an lateral contract. Like A, the offer can be accepted by fully performing the required act or forbearance. B, there is no need to give advance notice of acceptances to the offer. So C, the offer can, like all other offers, be withdrawn before it has been accepted. And this is
now, let's go to consideration. So, the basic idea of consideration signifies some legally recognized return that is given in exchange for an enforceable promise. So, consideration comes in the form of either a benefit conferred by the promises on the promisor or a determined incurred by the promises. In return for the promisor promise, it is not necessary that the promise incurred determine simultaneously with the promisor being conferred a benefit. The benefit and or determine has to be requested by the promisor in order for there to be a link between the benefits and or determine and the promise sought to be enforced. If the promises choose of his or her own volition and without more to incur a determine or confer a benefit on the promisor. So this will not constitute sufficient consideration, while local case law has acknowledged that the doctrine of consideration has become increasingly less relevant. So there is no definite pronouncement on the status of the doctrine of consideration in Singapore yet. So the requirement of nexus past consideration is not good consideration. So the consideration for a promise must be casually related to the promise itself. So that's as a promise that is given as a mere expression of gratitude for past service. So this is for sure, and is unsupported by valid consideration. Past consideration is not good consideration. However, this is not defined rule. In some circumstances, past consideration might be seen as good consideration if the promisee can show that. So, like A, the promisee performed the act at the promisor request, or B, if it was clearly understood or implied at the time of the request that the promisee would be rewarded for the acts. And C, the eventual promise is one that would have been enforceable if it had been made at the time of the act. So in Singapore, case law has questioned against taking a strictly chronological view extraining whether consideration is past consideration. So the requirement of value. So valuable consideration might consist either in some right, interested, profit, or benefit accruing to one party, or some forbearance determined, loss or responsibility given, suffered, or undertaken by the other party. So this is 2. 3. Consideration must be sufficient, although it need not to be adequate. So a promise is enforceable as long as something valuable in the eyes of the law is exchanged for it. So the value of the consideration need not be equivalent to that of the promise, as the court has no comparative advantage in determining at what price goods should be sold. So the court will not inquire into the actual adequacy of the consideration. So a reciprocal promise that is impossible or uncertain in its performance would not constitute sufficient consideration. So this is, all before the pre-existing duties. So this is all what's we have
Now,
discussed
certainty
for
and
today's video.
completeness of
I hope that
contract.
you guys
So
liked it.
before a contract can
Please
exist,
don't
its
forget
term must
to
be
share and
certain, and the
subscribe to this
contract must be
channel.
complete. A contract may be unenforceable for uncertainty or incompleteness, even though there has been both offer and acceptance between the parties. The contract is uncertain if a term in the contract is incomprehensible. So the contract is incomplete if certain terms do not but should exist, such that the non-existence of those terms make the contract incomprehensible. So certainty of term. An agreement to enter into a contract later on is not enforceable. Nonetheless, courts do not expect commercial document to be drafted with utmost precisions and certainty. So, the ambiguity of words is not a reason for not enforcing them, as long as the fair meaning of the parties can be extracted. The court will endeavor to give effect to an agreement rather than to strike it down. So, in previous courses of dealing between the parties or trade practice may remedy the gaps in the contract. So, where sufficient intention to be bound can be inferred from the parties' reliance on the contract, it will be difficult to establish that the contract is void for vagueness or uncertainty. So, incomplete agreement is a contract is not binding if essential matters, without which the contract is too uncertain or incomplete to be workable, remain yet to be agreed upon. This matter must make the contract unworkable or void for uncertainty to be considered essential.